Bonji Vacorja. Hello, everybody. Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat, where I am in conversation with a member of the Order of Bards, Ovids and Druids. And as I've been doing for the last few chats, I've started with a prayer for peace for all over the world. So, Gemara Shiakon ar fud na crinne, Gemara Shiakon in our Jaili, agus in our Jira. Gunari Linlan ar Garamaka, Gamid Buikas Jeev, Jeha Quivdaka, Spirit Quivdaka. May peace prevail on earth. May peace prevail in our homes and in our countries. May our missions be accomplished. We thank you, guardian spirits and guardian deities. As the fever of day calms towards twilight, may all that is strained in us come to ease. We pray for all who suffered violence today, and may an unexpected serenity surprise them. For all those who risk their lives each day for peace, may their hearts glimpse providence at the heart of history. That those who make riches from violence and war might hear in their dreams the cries of the lost. That we might see through our fear of each other a new vision to heal our fatal attraction to aggression. That those who enjoy the privilege of peace might not forget their tormented brothers and sisters. That the wolf might lie down with the lamb, that our swords be beaten into plowshares, and no hurt or harm be done anywhere along the Holy Mountain. That's thanks to John O'Donoghue, Irish poet and philosopher. So, let me see where you're all from this week. Hi, Bianca. You were my guest last week. Wonderful. Gunter from Switzerland. Erica from Turkey. Or Aaron from Turkey. And Sal from Ulster. And Linda from Australia. You're up early. It's just lovely to see you. And Lexi from Denver. And wait a second, where have we got people? Finland. Hi, Francis. And Stephanie from Utah. Carrie from Michigan. Lovely. And Zane from, greetings from the teaching place of Ella Young, Berkeley, California. Lovely. Hi, Alan from Killaloe, and lovely to see you. And Chile, London. It's actually bright and sunny here in Ireland. Well, it was today, and really cold with a sharp cold wind, but at least we had sunlight. And Ava from Belgium. It's lovely. Texas, Crouch End, New Hampshire. Arden Murcutt, hi, John. Lovely to see you again. And Weston-super-Mare. Cold and snowy London. Oh, my goodness. And Poland, Emirates, I don't know what the weather is like there. So, Belarus, okay. Cornwall, Ohio, Sleepy Slough, Stratford-on-Avon, Belgrade, Norway. Oh, from Norway, but presently in Belgrade. Washington, West Yorkshire, Wales, High River, Alberta. Hi, Jane, Lincolnshire, Alberta, Canada. Wonderful. You're all very, very welcome to another chat. This is our 73rd. I got the number wrong last week. I said it was 75 when in fact it was 72. Anyway, so let me introduce you to my guest this evening, and it's Stuart Jeffrey. Stuart, you're so welcome to this Fireside Chat.
Thank you. It's great to be here. And just listening to that list of places, wow.
It's fascinating, isn't it? We get them from all continents. You know, it's just lovely that people. I'm always impressed with the people in the Southern Hemisphere who get up extra early to. I know it's in New Zealand it's an hour later the next day, but for the Australians getting up extra early, I'm very, very impressed that they do that, because I'm a night owl, not a morning person. So I was very, very appreciative for people who make the effort to tune in. So, and somebody says. Stormy Richmond, tornado warning just expiring. Oh my goodness! I hope you didn't have too much damage there. Wow. So plenty from the US. Stephanie says we're everywhere. That's right. Luckily, no snow, and cold and sunny in Poland, but no snow. That's wonderful. So, where are you, Stuart, and where do you hail from?
So I'm in Kent, in England, about 30 miles from London. And yeah, we've had snow today. on and off, and it is freezing out there, absolutely freezing. I was in a t-shirt beginning of the week and wrapped up very warm today.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shock. I was, in Galway at the weekend and sitting out all the time, really enjoying this wonderful weather. Now, Galway is notorious for its rain. And then, oh my God, the shock of you going from 18 degrees down to whatever it was, 6 today. It's quite a change. So yes, there are lots of people having snow or cold, if not snow. So what's your landscape like in Kent?
So I've sort of grown up around. We've got the North Downs, which runs sort of across the top of Kent and into Surrey, and I've kind of grown up either side of that, and they are my hills, and I can see them from where from the top of the bedroom window, sort of thing. And the bit I can see is just sort of lush woodland, farmland beforehand, and then woodland beyond. So it's kind of a very nice, almost rural looking, but it feels. But I'm I live in the centre of a large town, and it's quite urban either side of it, if you see what I mean. But the trees up there, it's sort of mature oak. And some birch and things. It's very, very nice place to walk.
I've been to Canterbury. That's in Kent, isn't it? Yes. Yeah. And I remember walking in the country and just seeing all the rape and the flower, the mustard in just the yellow expanse. This is in the summer, absolutely beautiful. Do you have interesting sacred sites in near where you are?
So I didn't hear that.
Sorry, do you have any ancient sacred sites near you?
Yeah, so I live right on the banks of the River Medway, and we have what's called the Medway megaliths. So there's, I think, 4 or 5 sets of stones. They're in various sort of states of array, I mean, we do so there are sort of rituals at 2 of them. There's one called Kit's Coty House, which has got the dolmen.
It's got what is it called?
Kit's Coty House.
Kit's Coty House.
Yeah, no idea why.
Oh, okay.
But yes, and it's got the sort of dolmen stone and the 3 standing stones, and we've got another sort of long barrow with some exposed stones about 5 miles the other side of the water, part of the same sort of grouping, and both of those do have rituals from time to time, which is quite nice. So there's quite a bit here in terms of that ancient those ancient monuments.
And when you say rituals, is this from your own grove or seed group, or are there other people who have rituals there?
There's a Maidstone group that goes up. It's been up to Kit's Coty. There's lots of people use Kit's Coty, and there's a Kent Corsed which does sort of quarterly ones. It's just restarted doing the quarterly ones at it's called the Cauldron Stones. That's on top of a long barrow. I turn up occasionally, well, probably twice a year. I don't run them.
Okay. Are you a member in a seed group or a grove, or are you solitary?
So at the moment, solitary. I have been in the grove, and it finished, about 10 years ago. But
okay.
I've been solitary since.
So what is it that brought you to Druidry?
It was about 1994, and I was in a bookshop in Rochester called Destinies, which was one of these nice New Age bookshops, and heavily into the New Age stuff. And off the shelf jumped Philip Carl Gomm's book on the Druid Way, and I read it and just devoured it a few times. I've still got it somewhere, it was that moment, and I can't remember the exact date in 1994, but I know it was 1994.
Well, I had a similar experience. I was in a bookshop in 2003. It was July, and I just picked up my friend from from the airport, Shaban Kalulu, who's a healer, Tanzania, and this book jumped out, and it was Cassandra Eason's book, The Modern Day Druidess. And she mentioned OBOD at the back of the book, and she said she was solitary. I thought, great, I don't like groups. And I did. And it's just interesting, that book, just like you say, it's interesting how books pop out this isn't the only time I've had a book pop out that just, I'm not looking for it. It just comes out and I say, that's the book. So it's just a wonderful magic afoot.
Yeah, I mean, it took me 10 years to actually join OBOD, but it was there, and I was sort of reading around the subjects and busy with family and stuff. So the timing wasn't quite right, but it was very much, that was the seed that got me going.
Oh, wonderful. So do you how do you, I suppose, a little bit, what's your day job? What do you do? And how, I know you've got a nursing background, well, NHS.
Yeah, so I've up until about 18 months ago, I was what's loosely termed as an NHS lifer. Lots of us had sort of just worked in the NHS, never did anything else, and I worked as a nurse, and then I became into management, and I was a director for 10 years in hospitals and what's called a commissioning group, and I worked through the first bit of COVID, looking after sort of it being I think the title was either tactical commander or incident commander or something, so it was quite fun, if you could call it fun. Fun's probably the wrong word. Exciting. Okay. And then I kind of got to the end of that, and had the offer of moving out and into academia. So now I lecture and do research and things at the University of Kent down in Canterbury.
Okay.
So that's quite nice. It's a phenomenal change of pace, and it's I lecture on global sustainable healthcare, so it's kind of got that lovely sort of green feel to it, which sort of cheers me up when I'm talking passionately about climate change and so forth, which I find really exciting.
I'm intrigued. Can you tell us what global sustainable healthcare is? Or
oh, I wish I could tell you.
We're land doing that one now.
It's really, really difficult because healthcare is really resource intensive, and no one's really done it in a proper sustainable way, in a way that meets the and we talk about the growing needs, the changing needs of the population, the fact that much of the world is getting really, really much older, and the impacts that has, and the reductions in staff that you get in terms of the younger people, and the older people like me are kind of increasing in numbers and driving demand up. So you've kind of got this demand and supply problem, and as well as the fact that the drugs that are used are probably the biggest ecological footprint of all. In the UK, it's about 25% of the footprint of the English NHS is pharmaceuticals.
Wow.
Trying to tackle that is really difficult, and that's with a developed health system. When you trying to get it into places, in some places in Africa, for example, where there's very little infrastructure there. And I think you mentioned you worked in Africa as a nurse, and so you kind of know that there isn't the infrastructure there. And if they replicated what we have here, it's going to use a huge amount of resources. So I don't know what global sustainable healthcare is, which makes it all the more interesting to teach.
One thing that struck me, interesting that it's a 25% footprint in terms of just pharmaceuticals. One of the things I've noticed the difference from when I was nursing, which was in the late 70s, early 80s, where things were autoclaved and reused, like dressing sets, for example. And now everything is disposable. Everything, just use it once, it goes into a bin, and invariably it's plastic. And how hospitals get around that? I know they obviously have incinerators, but when I worked in Kenya, I was doing primary healthcare, and we reused our needles and our syringes. Now, we autoclaved them, and we kept using the needles because there were just no resources. We just used what we had until the needles were blunt. But they were clean. We weren't spreading infection, but they were autoclaved. And how then coming back here, and everything is disposable and single use, except obviously instruments in theatre, they tend to still do that. I assume they still use metal forceps instead of plastic disposable ones for surgery. But it's such a pity that there's so much waste, I suppose.
Yes, absolutely. And I suspect, I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking, yes, I can remember. I mean, it's probably about 7 years since I last worked in a hospital, but certainly 7 years ago, things were being autoclaved and the theatre sets were coming forward. But yes, most other stuff is, as you say, very disposable, and creates a significant amount of waste. And certainly the hospital I worked at, that waste would go off then to be not so much incinerated, but baked into. I think they baked it into things, into like hardcore for use in buildings and things.
Oh, okay.
So it kind of wasn't sort of burnt and just sent up into the atmosphere. And they and some of the autoclaves were quite interesting. They were starting to move away from just the 110 degrees of steam or whatever it was into into low temperature sterilization with some specific ionized water or something. I seem to recall, which was much better for the environment, I think. Because it didn't require so much energy, I think. And I really don't know if it's better or worse, but my gut feeling is it was slightly better.
It's interesting because I wasn't aware when you're talking about transmuting this waste into some kind of hardcore that can be put into buildings. 2 weeks ago, my guest was Mark Buxton Kelly, and we were talking about what you can do with plastic, and he said it's about rebuilding stuff with plastic because it's going to be there forever. And he was showing us old t-shirts that are made of polyester that don't break down, so he's cut them into threads or into strips, and he's crocheting them to make baskets that are living and long lasting. So it's around using stuff that doesn't biodegrade into something permanent. And I suppose using that stuff, or whatever it is, they're recreating that into some kind of aggregate or hardcore for buildings.
I can't think of another way of dealing with it, which is better in the longer term. I mean, it's not brilliant in its own right, but it's better than just burning it or dumping it. Clearly.
Well, certainly, yes, and yeah, absolutely, fascinating. So if you're talking about, I've caught you now on this one because sustainable healthcare. I mean, what are the questions people are asking, and is there, what pathways are they heading down, or what are they curious about?
So one of the wonderful things about my courses, I mean, it's the people on it are from, well, it's international. So I kind of get all of these stories from India, from Africa, from the US, and so I kind of learn quite a lot about other places' healthcare. And it really does vary. So people will talk about things like infections and COVID and pandemics. So we have a session on pandemics, which is always quite popular given what's going on.
I can imagine.
And we talk a bit about energy and workforce and so forth, and the problems that each country faces are different. Some places have got a real problem, for example, around fraud and corruption, and others have got just a huge amount of energy and waste and things like there's a phrase called the commercial determinants of health. So the commercial world driving both healthcare and bad health behaviours, if you like.
Yes,
and you can think of the McDonald's ads of old, for example, and smoking ads. I mean, they're the commercial determinants, but you've also got the pharmaceuticals really pushing their wares in a way that is sometimes not as helpful as you'd like it to be. Shall I put it as
very kind? Yeah, it's a strange one. You think of McDonald's and bad diet and bad food, but even in hospital, because Howard, my husband, he died 7 years ago, but he was spent 4 weeks in hospital, and the food was appalling. It started off fine when he read the menu, because he was given a menu. I think, oh, this is nice to have a menu in a hospital. Well, there were no menus when I was a nurse, but by the time it arrived at his bedside, it had been dried out. Cooked very nicely, maybe hours ago, put on a plate into some kind of warming thingy, and even the tray was hot. And where's the nutrition in that? And where's the healing?
Well, quite. And I know when I was in the hospital in North Kent, and we were challenged over our grey food, and the chief exec insisted that the caterers at the time, I forget who they were, wheeled a trolley up so the board could taste the food and look at it, and we went, okay, I think we need to do something about this.
Yes.
And it improved. It really did improve. Which, I mean, it's still not brilliant, and I do have, having. I do love the smell of the food in hospital. I think it's just wonderful. But it is, it certainly has been quite stodgy in the past, and not as fresh and as appealing as what I cook at home, for example.
No, I remember the old days. It was, if somebody had an ulcer, it was white bread and white rice and white fish on a white plate. How are you ever going to motivate anybody to change their diet with that? It was really, really poor. So, I mean, there's lots of comments. Blake says there's so much to be said about fresh food. I agree. That's the thing with fast food. It's so often produced fast because it's already been produced long ago. Sigh. And it always seems that it's old food in hospital. That's Poppy, and she's in Crete. Yeah, Hannah says, what's quicker than picking an apple from a tree? Yeah, when it's in season, and if the tree is there and you're there and you're not in hospital. But yes, I think one cannot argue with fresh fruit. But it's the fastness and, commercially driven. There's profits and also so-called expediency. But if people had good food in hospitals, they might heal quicker. But likewise, if they had a good diet at home, or if there was more emphasis on good food,
Absolutely. But we are products of the society, and there is this huge commercial drive within society for corporations to make money, and they have no other drive than to make money.
Well, you have your work cut out for you, Stuart. You're going to inspire all these students of yours, and see where you go from there. I mean, the conversations need to be had. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Zane said the cafeteria in a hospital in San Francisco served mostly hamburgers and fried food. And Verianta, I visited the central kitchen of the hospital and always fresh and smell nice. But true, by the time it gets to the patient, it has become unhealthy. Oh, it's such a pity. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, Vedianta. I think you're a friend of mine.
Ah, okay. And then the Garden News says hospitals aren't staffed enough to worry about the food. So anyway, so you have your work cut out, but it's important to have those conversations.
Absolutely, and I don't have the answers, but it's the conversations that are important, and it's really nice because it's part of a master's in healthcare management. So I'm kind of talking to the future leaders of healthcare, and
No pressure there.
and as I said to them, I think it was last week on my final lecture of that module, and I said, you do realise this is the most important course you'll ever do, because you're the future leaders, and I'm getting old, and I need you to make sure it's sorted out by the time I'm needing these services.
Well, absolutely. Oh yeah, and Blake says that it's these hospital food discussions remind me a lot of the work of former US First Lady Michelle Obama. We have much the same issues with school lunches in the USA. And I imagine it's in many places, school lunches. It's not just hospitals, in terms of food. Yeah. So anyway, may you not have to go to hospital if you do, and may you get good food also. Or in Africa, for example, my experience was that if a loved one's in hospital, you bring in the food for your relative. You don't depend on the hospital to provide it. So there's a better guarantee that you'll have, and also maybe your nursing care is done by relatives who will wash you and make sure that you're comfortable and well. So
yeah. I mean, that is quite a common thing in some countries.
Yeah.
I don't think it's just Africa. I think places in Eastern Asia do that, have that approach as well.
Which it's lovely if you have a relative to be able to take time off and do that. Otherwise, it's very, very, very difficult. So, you are how do you? Okay, well, I suppose what is it in terms of your Druidry? Is it something you are or you do, or how do you engage with Druidry? Is it something you are or something you do?
It's definitely who I am. It's a way of being. It's not a way of doing. Definitely. So it's kind of my approach to life, I suppose, more than sort of just going out and doing some rituals and praying to some gods or whatever people might expect a druid to do, but it kind of comes and weaves its way through my relationship with the world beyond my skin and within my skin, I guess. So yeah, it's not a doing thing; it's a being thing, undoubtedly, and it's a way of framing the world around me. Doesn't necessarily make me act quite the way I want to all the time, but but it does pull me up sharp sometimes.
So you mentioned before around sacred action. I mean, you've can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we've been a few of us got together. Let's go back. So I was kind of really inspired by the anti-fracking movement, the Warriors' Call from it must be about eight or 9 years ago now, and I wasn't quite in at the start, and I thought it was fantastic. And I've been a Green campaigner all my life since I joined the Green Party in 1984.
Okay.
And Greenpeace as well, and I've been around that whole thing all my adult life, and the Warriors' Call was a really interesting way of doing sacred action and campaigning, and I went down to Balcombe a couple of times and up to Preston a couple of times as well to join some of the protests up there, and it was really inspiring, and there's a group called Sacred Earth Activism who kind of are wider in their remit around. It's not just druids; there are druids in there. It's kind of much more interfaith, I suppose, or interspiritual, or whatever the phrase is. I'm not sure. And I've been working. I've been sort of talking with a few people over the last few years, and we kind of. I kind of had this idea of an Order of the Oak. There's an Order of the U within the Druid network, which I'm quite active in, and it's the Order of the U is very much an inner focus. It's contemplative and so forth. And I kind of thought, well, there's another side to this, isn't there? And it's an oak tree, and it's leadership, and it's going out there and doing stuff. And I thought, so I touted the idea around for a bit, and got a few of us together, and we've been doing a few bits. So we kind of managed to kick things off just before COP26 in Glasgow. And we did the usual Facebook group, and we've got 400 people or so on that. And we've got a Discord channel, and where there's about 20 of us who are kind of active and doing the doing. And for COP, we thought because we're Order of the Oak, we thought we'd plant some acorns. So we planted some acorns and did a ritual around it, and the idea was it's a seed of leadership. And so we kind of built this this idea of the oak tree as a leadership model, but a personal leadership model, as well as calling for others to take leadership, but specifically around climate and ecological emergency and related things such as inequalities and so forth. So sort of fairly rounded approach to the troubles that the world is working within. So we've done a few bits and pieces, a very small number of bits and pieces at the moment, because we are very, very new. And the idea is we're going to try and do a bit of a sacred action probably every the quarters, just to sort of put something out there on both in a physical dimension and as well as a spiritual dimension, to try and just nudge things in the right direction. And we'll do some reactive stuff in the meantime. And I know some of the crew are turning up to XR protests, and there's protests they're involved with in Norway with pipelines and so forth. So lots of really good stuff that people are doing, either within the sort of badge of this Order of the Oak, or within their own right. And it's all good. It's all good. Whatever happens, as long as it's heading us in the right direction, it's wonderful. So yeah, we've been doing that for the last 6 months, which is really, really pleasurable and great to have such a good community around us.
Oh, there's one question here, and I also want to get back to you. Several times you meant bits and pieces, and I'm curious about your bits and pieces. Anne says, can you please explain a bit more about the way of the Druid way of being in the world?
Ooh. Well, there's a question, isn't it? I think it's way of being in the world. So I think it's kind of, so for me it stems from kind of this broad animistic concept that everything is energy and we are part of it, and therefore there is no separation. And on the basis that there is no separation, if I do something that might be considered external, I'm actually doing it to myself because I'm part of it. So it kind of, it's kind of this idea that there aren't any boundaries, that we are part of a whole, and therefore the relationship is important between the bits within the whole. Probably not explaining that very well, but it's yeah, that's about as far as I can get, I think. Yeah.
And it's a hard question because that's why I think it was meant for you, so that's why I handed it to you. But I suppose it's what's coming from within. It's how you are as a druid in your inner world, and then that radiates out into your way of being. And I suppose even as a lecturer in looking at questions around sustainable healthcare, or creating the Order of the Oak. And yes, thanks, Anne. She says she gets the idea. Thank you very much for your feedback.
Yeah.
No pressure. So, Blake says, I feel for you. Explaining the Druid way of being is a long, complicated answer derived from experience and is so individual. Absolutely, Blake. Anyway, Philip said that was a good way of explaining. I don't know who was explaining, yours or mine. Anyway, maybe a combination of both. But I do think it starts from within and then kind of radiates out. Yeah.
And there is something very, very fundamental about the sacred nature of the world that is fundamental. Whether it's the teacup in front of me, actually that is sacred. It's part of the web of existence. It might not have quite as much energy as the tree in my garden, but it's still part of it.
Absolutely, and I suppose it's honouring absolutely everything, because it was the TK comes from a plant. Jamie says, animism is beautiful. You expressed it well. A way of being is immersive. That's how I feel too.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the word immersive. But to get back, you mentioned you've done these bits and pieces. So just to get an idea, some examples of what you've done in addition to planting your acorns, because I think that's an absolutely wonderful, that potential going into the ground,
So we did a joint letter to Alok Sharma. I think you may have even signed it.
I did, yes.
We've been doing so we did some winter dreaming. So we did at the winter solstice. We exploded with this acorn idea, and then we went a bit quiet for a month or so and thought, well, we probably need to work out what we're doing properly and a way of working. So we did some winter dreaming and some journeying and came up with a bit of a framework and a plan and so forth. So we did a bit of that, and then most recently we've kind of set up this. We've got a sigil designed by Barry. What's his surname? Famous Barry with the
Patterson.
Yeah. He said that's a fantastic sigil, and so we've been putting some power into that, and working with ritual and to empower the sigil, and part of that is a dedication, and that will it's kind of evolving into our. This is how you join us. You draw the sigil and you do a dedication type of thing. So it's quite a spiritual way of joining, rather than paying a £5 a year membership fee or anything like that. And as long as people are working within the values and of the organisation, it's kind of there for everybody's organisation.
I love the idea of a sigil because like the Warriors Call, they have their own sigil, and I just loved how that was. As I say, called into being, people journeying again and coming up with it. Were you involved in that, drawing up that sigil with Warriors Call?
No. It was Barry. It's wonderful.
Can you show us, or is it a secret sigil for unless you join?
It's online. I probably can't show you because I don't think I've got one that's easy to hand. But so yes, it's on. We've got it as a big logo on the website and things.
So it's the Order of the Oak is your website. Yeah. Oh, okay. So people can look that up.
It's the OM symbol for the oak with some circles and the letters of the Order of the Oak as sigils usually are. So we've kind of built it around that, and because we've got lots of O's, you've got little. What looks like trees or a grove from above.
Oh, okay. I'm going. I must get on and have a look at it. Yeah, we're all interested in a web address. I think if I suppose if you just
what is it? What is it? I'll tell you in a second. Oh, I mustn't do that. That will get rid of me, won't it? I think it's something like the order of the yes, it's the order of the oak.wordpress.com.
Okay. What have I done? I've lost you. Sorry.
Backstage.
Yeah, sorry. It was where my I clicked on something. Yes, the cursor must have been on your screen, and then I just clicked on it to go in here. So what is it? The order?
It's the order of the oak.wordpress.com. So it's a nice free website.
So the order of the oak.wordpress.com. Great. So that's going to go up on all. Yeah, that's there for everybody. Great. Sorry, but apologies for sending back. I don't know if you realize, my viewers, that when my guests are backstage, I can see them through a veil. It's almost like they're in the other world, and then they come through the veil onto the screen. So anyway, people have found it. That's great.
Excellent.
So, wonderful. And Blake says, thank you. So many OBODs doing such great things. Love supporting and learning about ventures. Wonderful. So, what else do you do? I mean, I know you're are you working on a book?
Yeah. So I'm just touting it around some agents at the moment, but I had a bit of time last year, and I thought I'd write Druidry into organisational management, which sounds very, very strange when I say it, I must say. So I kind of looked at, because I've been a professional manager for 20 odd years or whatever it is, and there's all these things, sort of high level frameworks that you use in management, things like triple bottom line and balanced scorecards and quality improvement and so forth, and I got to thinking that actually they sound a lot like some of the stuff that you could base in a bit of a and I've called it cosmomimicry, but it's a Druid reference, if you like. So
cosmomimicry.
Mimicry. So mimicking the cosmos, the world. Yeah. And I started by looking at this thing. There's this concept called the balanced scorecard. It's about 30 years ago it came out, and it kind of takes aspects of an organization, 4 aspects of an organization, and tries to balance them a bit. And I looked at it and thought, I drew it in a way that suddenly it dawned on me, I've got some 4 quarters here, and I've got earth, air, fire, and water, and I've kind of got north, east, south, and west, and this sort of bubbling thing went on in my head. I thought, I wonder if, just for purely recreational purposes, I'm going to rewrite this whole balanced scorecard in a way that draws upon the values and thinking around the elements and the directions. So I kind of drew this thing, and it seemed to work. And then I looked at these quality improvement cycles and business planning cycles and thought, yeah. And I was chatting with my sister of all people who was doing a similar thing with gardening as a metaphor. And I thought, well, actually, there's this kind of cyclic thing here of the wheel of the year and the seasons, and actually that you can kind of take this quality improvement cycle and match it to the as a framework to the season. So gestate a problem, think about a problem, sow it in the spring and watch it start to get some shoots, and then in the summer it's starting to it's in full flower, and then you reap the rewards in winter, and then you want to think about it again and improve it for the next time. So it's kind of got this nice cyclic thing. So I kind of did all of these bits and pieces, and I've written them up, and I'm trying to find an agent who doesn't think I'm completely bonkers.
You see, when you put it like that, it makes loads of sense. Are you explicit about it being druidic, or are you? How
No,
do you sell it, or how do you?
so I'm not at the moment. No, I've kind of left it. I've kind of left the D word out of it.
Okay.
I'm more than comfortable if if it ever gets to being published to being named as a druid on in the bio bit. But I've kind of left that out and left it just as a sort of this is a way of looking at the universe and the cosmos, and applying it, because it might just have a. I mean, the idea is it's a book for managers to try and prompt their thinking in a slightly different way, get them thinking about the natural world and the impacts their organisation is having on it. So I've got this underlying theme of sustainability running through it as well.
Good.
Think about what you're doing, sort of thing. So I've aimed it very much at professional managers, executives, and so forth. So I've kind of not pushed the druid word, but I'm happy that I can be identified as one. But I wanted to get the widest audience, because it is just a nudging thing, and to get people to try and think differently.
Well, it's Stephanie says, I work in quality improvement. I love Stuart's take on it much more than my jobs. There's that's lovely. And Colleen says, sounds great. And then Blake says, druids will read it and be wise to what you're doing. We're good like that. Except it's not for the converted. It's for those to be converted. What a great idea. So great feedback for this. Are you familiar? Do you know Pamela Meeking Stewart? She's a member from New Zealand.
No.
She's come a few times to the gatherings. She has developed a Well of Shagash as a divination tool, and she works in the corporate area. Okay. And hers is around the cycles and project cycles and starting with your seed. Okay. And that notion of, and this is, forgive me, Pamela, if I'm not getting this right, but that often a seed is sown, but not in proper soil. And then people jump straight to the outcome and to the harvest. And it's like, no. You come way, way back looking at the soil, what's going to support this, what's going to hinder this. And you move on into the various, it's just germinated. Now what happens next, and so on and so forth, before you get to whatever the great outcome is. And so she's kind of one for corporates that's less druidic-y. And it's the same wheel. So she has it on like a divination cloth, and you have your 10 hazelnuts, and you drop them and see where they land. And it's quite fascinating. But it's obviously it's a different presentation to your idea, but very much in keeping with what you're saying. And
I think I need to look that up quite quickly.
The Well of Shagash. So I took her there many years ago, was this maybe 4 years ago, to the Well of Shagash, and it's open 1 day a year. It's in Carbery, County Kildare, the Newbury estate, and so it's the source of the River Boyne, and that's where the 9 hazel, well, they're not there now, but the 9 hazel trees were there. They dropped the nuts in, and the salmon took them. And in some stories, there are 5 streams leading from the well, representing the 5 senses or the 5 rivers of Ireland. We have many more than 5 rivers, by the way. But one of those rivers is the River Boyne. And anyway, it's a long story about Finn McCool and how he got the salmon of knowledge. But it's the Well of Shagash. And I took her there to actually... for her to make an offering there, given that this is her divination tool. So it's well worth looking at.
Yeah, I'll have to make contact. Looking for people to comment and read and so forth, which will be so. Yes, sounds.
Brilliant. Well, afterwards I can give you her email address. That'd be great. So So you're talking a lot about Druidry is supporting in many, many ways your professional life, and how you're integrating it in a very creative way into your professional life. And you seem to have so many professional strings, which is great. How has it supported you personally?
Well, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I think it's. I mean, the stuff I've done over the course of my life, it can get very depressing. And if you have the wrong, I suppose, the wrong outlook on stuff, and I know you and I were talking about nursing, I think before before we started, and that idea of being with people as they're dying is not for everybody, I think. But having a sense of having the frameworks within Druidry, having the understanding that everything is energy, that everything contains spirit and energy and so forth, and therefore death is kind of just change, and it's really helpful. So it's kind of helped me with some of the more the tougher stuff I've done, I suppose. And that's one example in terms of looking after people who are dying, where some of the environmental campaigning does right to this day get very, very painful. And I look at I was it last week when both the North and South Pole had ridiculously high levels of heat. I think they were 40 degrees centigrade higher than normal.
I read that and I thought, how can that be?
Yeah, it's just awful. So I think having that kind of purpose, and the Druidry helps with that. So it's because it's all sacred, because it's all real and it's evolving. That kind of helps me look at that stuff sometimes and not completely collapse into a pit of despair, because it is very easy to do that, I think. So I have been able to carry on, but it's still really painful and it hurts, but it just has helped me carry on.
Yeah, I think that's really good, that because if you fall into a pit of despair, then you're helpless, powerless, and apathetic. And then it's like, well, nothing we can do. We just continue as we are. But the idea of having that hope or that support or that kind of bedrock or that, I suppose in many ways, it's an anchor, isn't it? To that we can hold on to and still look for change or different ways of being, or remembering our connection and how part of everything we are, rather than being so fragmented and so distanced from it.
Yeah, absolutely, and trying to maintain that connection as well as remember it, and I'm like everybody. I'll at times, and quite a few. I think it was probably a few days ago. I kind of started to really struggle with all of the stuff that's going on, and I know at the back of my mind, the thing I've got to do is sit down in the morning and meditate and go out into the garden and touch the tree that I particularly like and say hello to it. And it kind of drags me back. And it might take a couple of days, but it does drag me back into a better place.
Absolutely. And I think that remembering those anchors and those places in nature that and breathing in the essence of a tree, it's like, oh yeah, I'm back now on track. Blake says, an animistic point of view, I feel, really helps us find our way through managing when dealing with climate change. At least it factors in for me. Yeah, I mean, and I find that to be the case myself. How do you honor your ancestors? Because obviously you're doing a good job of as a future ancestor, I think. You're paving the way maybe to leave the world a better place. And how do you honor your ancestors going back? Or do you have a sense of your ancestors? You are from Kent, so do you have an ancestral connection, not just in the land, but a genealogical one?
Yeah. So my ancestry is mostly Kent and Devon, and I did do I traced my tree, my family tree.
Did you?
And my mother's got an unusual surname, Eniver, and
It's what?
Eniver.
Eniver.
Yeah, and it's very unusual, and there's only one line of Enivers in the country, and probably the world these days, I guess. And so it was a nice and easy one to trace back, and so I've done a lot of that, and I've found some pretty awful characters. So I mentioned I've got a line in Kent, and there's a gang of smugglers called the Hawkhurst Gang, who
Oh, lovely.
Early 18th century basically ruled the south of England with through terror, and two of them are relatives of mine, which is. I do struggle on how exactly do I honour. I mean, they were hanged in, is it Newgate or something? Yeah, I think Newgate. And I found the Old Bailey court records and stuff. They were nasty people. How do I honour them? It's one of the things that's I've always really struggled with, and the only way I can begin to, I mean, those two I described weren't actually direct. I mean, they were effectively uncles of, so they weren't quite my direct ancestors, but it is something that I certainly had struggled hardest when I was doing the OBOD course, because you kind of know what's happened. And the only way I can kind of reconcile it is that it happened partly for a reason, but whatever that reason was, it's brought me here. And as long as I kind of hang on to the fact that, yeah, some of the stuff wasn't very nice, but actually there must have been some good stuff as well. We're all a mixture of stuff, and ultimately there's, however far you go back, there's always those ancestors right back to the primordial soup. If there were records of births, deaths, and marriages when that primordial soup was around, you could trace it all the way back there. So there's something quite magical about the evolution that's happened, and the fact that the last I've got back about 500 years, which is
wow.
Great. Well, purely because I've got this unusual surname in the family, so I've managed to get back to 14 something. But that last 500 years, yes, there's a lot of things that one knows happened, and I can see the interactions of my family within some of those. But actually, that's just kind of the way it's evolved, and those people are products of the society they were living in.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, they are part of me, and they're part of the world, so they are part of the whole. But yeah, it's a real struggle to say, great seven greats grandfather Bunce or whatever his name was, I honour you for all of that wonderful murdering and pillaging you did. No, I don't. But I do honour you for your presence on this world, but not necessarily for what you did. People do bad acts, I think. Rather, I try to think of people not being bad, but doing bad things, because we're all at the end of the day energy and spirit, and therefore.
Do you try? I mean, have you done like ancestral healing? Because obviously, people have left scar their behavior on their own lives as well as on. I'm sure their families suffered for that, or may have benefited, but many people will have suffered because of that. Have you done any kind of healing work?
No, and I must say that's quite a nice idea, isn't it?
Because I know I was in Germany with the order last October doing a workshop on ancestors, and it came up, many the participants there, that they have ancestors who haven't done good things, and you may carry guilt and shame and a lot of pain because of the actions of your ancestors. And we did work on healing that, going back with the journey, going back to an ancestor, and it happened that a week prior to that I was having a healing session with a healer, and it's funny, I hadn't made the connection until afterwards. He said there's some ancestral work that needs to be done. He says, I just want you to go back. I don't know who. Go back until you find the ancestor that needs it. And I did. And I found the ancestor, and who was in a lot of pain, but doing a lot of bad things. And I was able to offer some healing. And that shifted something. And then so I thought, oh, this is a great exercise. And it really worked for people. Just that little bit. So it's not about I honor you as a wonderful ancestor, but I'm going to heal the scar left by that kind of activity, that kind of behavior. And you say, I still have an optimistic view of people, that they're not intrinsically bad, they're intrinsically good. Yeah. But bad circumstances make them behave in a really, really bad way. And that to be able to heal that. And I found that really, really helpful. And I know the people at the workshop did as well. So I don't know if that's something to do. Because Stephanie says, I often wonder what those types of ancestors would be like in today's world. Would the bad characters be good and vice versa? Hard to say, and it's definitely a struggle. Well, there are still lots of people who wreak havoc and terror, who are, you can see that they're bad, and others they're not bad at all, and they still do it, Carmen says prayers help them to get a better place. Yeah. And then Julia says, we can learn from bad ancestors as well as good ones. Perhaps your ancestors learned from their family's mistakes, which shaped the ancestry through your direct line. Always lessons to be found. Great. So it's so Philip says, I've done healing with ancestors. Blake says, I find some ancestors are open to healing, while surprisingly others still aren't. However, we can do healing ourselves, of course, by making some type of peace with the situation and of the relation. Absolutely. And then Jamie says, unconditional love does not equal like or infer that you condone their actions, and that's okay. We're human beings, and there is always more to people than things they're remembered for. Yeah.
That's great words, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's that obviously, when you think of how you are in the world, that you haven't been struck, with the sin of the fathers coming right down, that you're, with your caring for the earth and all of that, that you haven't carried on that.
Well, I hope not. You never know, do you? But yeah, I mean, I hope not. It's no, there's some lovely thoughts there, and it's a really interesting idea that I'll have to explore, because I think this idea that people are intrinsically good but do bad things is kind of how I've reconciled it, and whether that's my ancestors or people in today's life, that's kind of how I try to think of people. They are shaped by their circumstances, and that circumstances is wide and varied. And I we'll never know the complete story. So
no. And even to offer healing, you don't need to know the complete stories. You're sending the energy backwards. But Poppy says, they say that we've all lived lives of being both evil and good. Forgiveness is for us all. And that's really interesting. And the cycle of life gives back to the giver what he gives. And even we don't understand it. Usually there is repentance and we say, why me? That's interesting. And then ultimately, this is from John King. Ultimately, the primary thing is to allow ourselves to heal no matter what has gone before. Now, Angie, 1995, I'm familiar with the work of Malidoma Somé. I've used his teaching for a long time. Says something, Malidoma Somé is a healer from Burkina Faso who lives in the US now. He says something unique about how the primary slave traders came to African continent initially looking for healing. I think in an abstract way, this could be relevant to this theme. That's interesting. I don't remember him writing that, so I missed it. The primary slave traders came to Africa initially looking for healing. And then what, became slave traders? I'm not too sure. That's interesting. And Stephanie says, I'm going to research ancestral healing now. Thank you for discussing this topic. This will be beneficial for everyone as none of us know all of our ancestor stories. That is so true. So, I mean, Stephanie, when I did that, that journey back, I didn't know who the person was. I didn't need it, and it wasn't important. It was just to be able to see the person and acknowledge them, recognize them, and offer the healing. And Poppy says, healing for whom? Well, actually, we were both healed by that. The fact that I was able to do it for that ancestor had an impact on me. So it's for all of us, I think.
I suspect we all need it, don't we?
Absolutely.
I'm sure there's nobody alive that hasn't got an ancestor who hasn't done something bad.
Oh, absolutely. So, what would you say has been your biggest achievement?
I think staying alive this long without well, just thinking about some of my youth, too many parties, too many motorbikes and so forth. But gosh, I don't know. I mean, I've been very proud of some of the stuff I did when I was working in the NHS.
Great. Yeah.
I'm very, very pleased with some stuff I did there and some changes I made. Really, really chuffed with that.
What kind of changes did you make?
Putting new services in, sort of innovative stuff that no one else has thought of.
Wonderful.
So primary care stuff, urgent care stuff, that kind of thing. Ideas that sort of popped into my head, and I managed to persuade boards to put into place. So yeah, I've done some really, really stuff there that I'm really proud of. I suppose things like getting through the OBOD course was was a real achievement. I really it took. I know it's people joke about the time it takes to get through it. It took me 12 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It was just amazing the number of times I'd get halfway through a grade and just give up. Pick it up 6 months, a year later, and say, I want to do this.
Oh, me likewise. It took me 7 years to get through the Bardic grade. So yeah, it takes the time it takes to do it, because it's not just the destination, but it's the whole journey along the way, and the stops and the frustrations, and the magical moments. Yeah, it all takes time,
It's good. It was the OVATE grade that took me forever.
Okay.
That was the struggle. Druid grade probably about 2 years, and the Bardic grade however many left, I can't remember. It was about 3. But yeah, it was the ovate grade I really, really struggled over.
Yeah, and I sailed through that one because I was doing all that stuff while should have been doing the Bardic grade. Anyway, it's really, really fascinating. But it's like everybody's journey is so different. It's just anyway. Well, congratulations and well done on getting through it and surviving it. So, you mentioned motorbikes, and I don't know what is the most reckless thing you've done?
I can't possibly tell you. I mean, this could be recorded.
Okay. Sorry, the most.
I think just riding the things is pretty reckless. Looking back on I mean, I rode them until I was in my late 20s, I suppose, and I think I stopped riding them when my daughter was born. That's one of the things I'm really proud of is my daughter. But I rode them from my teens to my late 20s, and how I, just the fact I survived it is because I got knocked off a couple of times, and it really hurts.
Oh, I can well imagine. Did you enjoy it? I mean, do you miss it now?
There is something very, very nice about it. I think there is something quite animalistic about the idea you've got nothing around you. I mean, I've never really ridden a horse, for example, but I can imagine the idea of moving fast on something of power with the wind around you. I mean, I used to do a lot of sailing and in little dinghies, and the idea, of harnessing the world around you and moving quickly with very little protection is really, well, the energy is incredible. The adrenaline's wonderful. I certainly wouldn't do it now because the roads are very, very busy, and I know I don't bounce so well.
Well, I rode a pony or a horse. That was a Connemara a few weeks ago for the first time in 31 years. I'd ridden when I was younger, and I've been wanting to get back on a horse for many years. It didn't happen, and I did. And I had remembered it, and I was high as a kite. Now, I cantered, I didn't gallop, but my back was so sore for about 2 weeks afterwards. But I've got back now, so I'm ready to get up again. I just love. I wouldn't go for a motorbike because I'm so short that I just wouldn't be able to hold a bike and I wouldn't be able to sit on a bike and have my foot on the ground and at the same time keep it up. So and when I hear bikers coming around me when I'm in the car, it just terrifies me. And I just say, may your mission be accomplished and may you be safe, because I never know where this is coming, because it sounds like an insect coming and I'm never able to know where it's coming from. So just bless all bikers and may they be safe. But on the horse, it's lovely. Again, it's also dangerous. I mean, you can fall off and all of that. And likewise, you can capsize in a boat, or you can get the boom hitting you or something. All of these things have an element of risk.
Yes.
But that feeling of in the air, running, you're going with the elements, or the speed of the power of the horse beneath you, or the bike, or the sails, it's magic.
Absolutely. And I must have forgotten, but it's probably sailing that kind of. Again, I was doing that in my teens, in the mid-teens onwards, and that kind of really, I remember that feeling of harnessing an element and moving this thing as fast as it would go through the water. It was just somehow magical, and I know that really did sort of help frame the probably the journey in Druidry, I'm sure, because that it was so elemental. It was just wonderful.
Oh yeah, and it's funny with sailing, you're working with two elements. It's just and it's almost like you're far from the earth, because that's down there someplace. That to trust the water and the air. It's just.
I don't know. The earth is what the boom is made of, and it does hit you.
Okay. Knock some sense into you. Brilliant. Yeah. So it's John says it's about vulnerability. It makes everything come into sharp focus. I'm wondering, are you talking about, I suppose, being on a bike, being on a horse, you're very powerful, but you're not. There's also that the risk. You are vulnerable when you take a risk, but
it's exciting.
It's exciting, and if we don't risk, we don't move forward. Everything, things have to involve some kind of risk. I mean, obviously, there's some greater risks than others, but that's just the wonderful buzz.
Yeah, I'm not getting on a bike anytime soon. Although I am actually going to a bike showroom tomorrow to drop something off to a friend of mine.
Oh, okay.
And if he does happen to offer me a quick test ride on a Harley, yeah, I might do that.
You can go slowly. Do you still have your gear? Your I don't know if you do wear leather and all that stuff.
I'm sure it wouldn't fit even if I kept it.
Okay, so just go carefully. John comes back with vulnerability increases actual engagement. I spent 40 years rock climbing. That is something I will not do. If that's the thing with ropes and on things, no. I can hill walk. I've climbed Kilimanjaro, but nothing that involves rocks would terrify me. I can even now. I'm just. I prefer to be on a bike than actually on a rock climbing. Blake is picturing you on a bike with the anthem "Born to be Played." Born to be Wild playing. That's Blake's view of you on a bike. Stuart.
Anyway. Blowing in the wind or not.
Yeah. Oh yeah, John says rope crampons. You're very alive. Forget it. I prefer to stay in my moribund state on the ground or on a horse's back. But no, that would terrify me. So
the horse is a bit high for me.
Well, mine was a Connemara pony, and but I remember being in Yosemite National Park. That was 24 years ago, and I saw people climbing El Capitan. It's this to me, it looks like sheer rock face. People climbing it, and it's like I just feel it here. This knot of anxiety, and then there's also that admiration for people for being able to do it and their madness. But again, it's that, yeah. And I suppose trusting your ability to find a foothold and a handhold and knowing your rock, just feeling your way. Or it's the same with the bike, just really knowing your bike and being at one with the bike and being able to, go around a corner at this thing, all that stuff.
Yeah, I was never that good. but yes, I know what you mean. I mean, good enough to ride it, but not. But yeah, the sort of that oneness is quite a nice way of putting it, I think. And yes, so I mean, I'm never a very particularly fast rider, or never particularly skillful at it, other than not dying. But you certainly do feel that kind of oneness with it, and it becomes an extension of what you do, and you get that sort of automatic. You do with the car, and it's probably the same with the car in some respects. Well, it's not nowhere near as exciting, but you get it's kind of an extension of yourself, and therefore everything is in it. All your actions are automatic and become quite natural in some respects. Probably why.
It's that wonderful sense of mastery, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's mastery with, not mastery over. But I just, It's like when driving, when you have anything that you're familiar with, that you just become at one with the task, and it's a lovely place to be able to embody what it is you do. So so what would you say has been your biggest challenge that you've overcome?
I think probably my early years, just as a whole, and not having a clue what to do. I mean, I said I was a nurse, but I didn't actually start nursing until I was 24.
Okay.
And kind of left school at 17 with handful of O levels, and no degree or anything like that, and had no idea what life was about for a while. So that was kind of that initial finding something that I might be able to do was probably getting my feet on a path to do something was probably the biggest challenge. Actually working out and picking a path almost. I mean, I could have done different things and I probably would have been okay with doing different things, but actually picking something and then sticking with it. So beyond that, it's been kind of straightforward in many respects, but yeah, just working out which path I wanted to be on was at an early age was probably the hardest.
Well, it was very hard for me. I wanted to do medicine and I didn't work hard enough. And then I did science, and then I drifted into nursing, and then I went to Africa to save the world, and then went into psychology. And that's when I kind of, now I've found I was 25 when I went to university the second time. And it's that, I think it's, some people know from, the time they're 5, I always wanted to be a whatever. And others, it's that windy path. Yeah. Or you do something for a certain length of time, and that's the right thing to do. And then you find yourself going down another path, which is the right path. And then maybe deviating to another one, which is also the right one. Some people's journeys are a single track, and others are,
Absolutely. And I remember people asking me, when I think I was in nursing, and someone said to me, "What's your 5-year plan?" And I tried not to laugh. No, I'd just see where the world takes me. If there's something happens that looks interesting, I might just do it. As long as I can pay the bills and have a roof over my head of some description, let's go with it. It'll be fun. But yes, my daughter, I mean, I remember her saying at about 12, 13, I want to be a journalist, and she studied, went to university to do journalism, and came out, and now she's a journalist.
Okay, so
I said to her the other day, "Are you happy doing work?" "I love it. It's the best job in the world."
Brilliant.
Fantastic. I wish I'd known at 13 what I wanted to do. It might have helped.
Well, it's interesting. John Gilbert says, "I was nearly 60 when I found my path. I was a journalist most of my life, then got made redundant and decided to go into care work. I really love what I'm doing now. It's never too late." I think that's lovely. Because so often people, they think when they're, late 50s, what can I do? No, nobody's going to hire me. I'm whatever it is, or I'm perceived as, having nothing to contribute. And then to go from journalism into care work, and I think it's wonderful. And then to be able, and my cousin did the same, and just completely did training in care work, and absolutely loved it. And you're right, it's never too late to do whatever.
Absolutely. And care work is as we were saying, sort of alluding to earlier, it is really, really rewarding. I would encourage everyone to, think about doing it, because it's a great job. It's sadly, one of the things that that we discovered through COVID was that the most valued jobs are the ones that are paid the least.
Oh,
and,
yes.
And care work is one of them. It's really badly paid, and it's so essential, but it is really rewarding.
And the relationship the person cared for has with their carer. I remember, even in nursing, that the person lowest down on the pecking order is the one that the patient identifies most with.
Yeah.
And often, if it's somebody who's giving out the tea, they can have a friendly chat, and often, a care assistant gets asked, the patient will ask, well, what do the doctors say, or am I dying? It's like, well, I don't know, I can't say, but it's like, I don't want to ask the doctor, but I can ask you because I feel safe with you, because you can connect and we can have that
absolutely
genuine relationship. And it's a pity it's so undervalued. And one of the things I loved about my nursing was the patient care. That's what I liked. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at the hospital, trying to maintain a connection back with both the patients and the staff, it required effort. And rather wonderfully, we had this fantastic cleaner who used to turn up on the executive corridor on a Friday afternoon, and a lot of us would stay behind just a bit later, just so we could chat with her and find out, because we thought we knew what was going on, and we were usually right, but sometimes she would give us a nugget, and we'd think, "Ooh, we didn't know that. We need to go and sort that out," because people would talk to her, and she would talk to us because we trusted her. But yeah, I mean, I used to once a month go down to a ward and put a uniform on and just make beds, or just help on very straightforward tasks, and people would talk to me, and I'd find out what it was like, and usually, I mean, there's very rarely a problem I discovered, but at least I had some real world experience of having a reasonable amount of assurance that things weren't horrendously bad, and because things can be horrendously bad in healthcare, as we saw yesterday with that. You probably didn't see it in elsewhere outside of England, but we had a report yesterday of 300 babies who have died or suffered as a result of dreadful care in Shrewsbury and Telford. These are just appalling things that happen, and when you're working in that environment, you kind of just got to have your eyes open, your ears open. Everything you're doing has to be to try to spot that kind of thing happening. I was just, I think, just very fortunate that nothing. I didn't miss anything on my watch, but it would have been easy to. I really would.
It's interesting how you donned the uniform and then went on to the wards and making beds or talking to this woman on a Friday evening, because I think for many people who do know what's happening, if there isn't a relationship with higher up in management, they don't have the relationship or the safety or the confidence to go and say, this is what's happening. If they're so distant, I mean, who'll believe me if I'm telling you about something? And you're right, it's about being able to engage at all levels. I think
and it's easy to say, and it's actually easy to do, and I think it does happen more than we know, but it's variable, and for me, with as a nurse, it's still, I think I've probably even still registered when I was still doing that. It was easier than perhaps some of my other colleagues who may have felt a little bit slightly more out of place, because I walk onto a ward and I know what's happening because I've run them. They're kind of they're my history.
Because you've had a practitioner experience where other colleagues might not have had. Is that it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
wow.
feel very natural on there. You know, I don't feel out of place. I know if people are running in that particular direction, I'm not going to bother them. But if they're wandering back towards me, I can have a chat with them, sort of thing. You know, you kind of got this feel for what's going on.
That's right. Blake says, our society desperately needs to reframe how it views jobs. Indeed, there are no menial jobs. Grocery workers are even important. Yeah. Janitors, there are noble jobs, important roles, equally important jobs that seem shinier, more professional, so to speak, in societal terms. Well, who removes the rubbish? If it's not done, what happens? Absolutely. You know, there's, and Philip says there needs to be some humility. I think a lot of humility at the top, not just some. That all jobs are important, because if the whole system is to work, then whatever is contributing, it's just a pity that some jobs are given more value than others and higher income and higher status. Because if you haven't got those, what are the so-called ordinary jobs, the system breaks down.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what can possibly be more important than growing food?
Yes.
But we have no life without food. Yeah, we pay farm workers very little. The hours are long and hard, and it's tough work. But that probably is the most important job. I can't think of anything. Yes, healthcare is important, but it's not as important as being able to eat.
Yeah, and minding babies, I think that's another one.
Sorry?
Minding babies, looking after babies.
Oh yeah, I don't have babies. I'm not doing that one.
Yeah,
I'll go grow the food. Much better at that.
Okay, and the pandemic showed us which jobs were most important. Indeed, they did. I mean, who was out? I remember, you know, loving the first lockdown. I didn't like the rest, but I loved the first one because it was sunny weather and I live in a lovely place. And you know, who was delivering? And I didn't go to a shop. Somebody did my shopping for me. My stepdaughter did, and I took advantage of that, and it was just bliss. But you know, there were people always working in the shops, you know, delivering, delivery people, farmers, everything. Farmers and bees, both necessary food for food and undervalued. Absolutely. The poor bees just get so manipulated by how they're used as slaves to pollinate some things, and then how they're just poisoned by, you know, weed killer and all sorts of other stuff. Absolutely.
One of the things, one of my lectures I do is on Cuba, and how, because back in 1990 it basically ran out of oil, and my lecture is about the impacts on health and healthcare in Cuba through the 1990s. And one of the things that happened over there was that they put an enormous amount of effort and work into food production, and the wages and conditions of farm workers improved drastically, and it became a really attractive profession to work in, and it helped get them through, and they were forced into reshaping their kind of social structures based on need over that longer period. Maybe if lockdown had happened for much longer, you know, we might have done the same. Who knows?
Yeah, and it's interesting that those changes happened as a result of an oil crisis, and I think maybe we're heading that way soon. You know, that we will have to reframe how we see work and jobs and what people do. Yeah, absolutely. So, what are you grateful for?
Can't you ask me easy questions?
Well, that'll be dull. What time is it? Don't answer that question because I know.
I don't know. I mean, just being here and experiencing stuff. I mean, it is. You know, who knows why we're here? But you know, one reason has to be to experience being in a physical form and whatever. So yeah, it's just the I think grateful for being here, on having my feet on the soil, and being able to breathe in that fresh air, and and sail on that water. That's the. I don't think there's anything else. That to me is the sort of wonder, isn't it, of existence, being able to experience it.
That's beautiful. So, what brings you joy?
I think exactly that. I mean, it's watching the cycle. I think that's seeing the birth and actually seeing the death as well. We've mentioned death a few times, but actually, being with, and I have seen. I've got one particular memory. I'm not going to share it, but I've got one very, very stark memory of a person dying in my mind that I doubt will ever leave me. I hope it will never leave me. It was just the most beautiful moment that I've ever experienced, and I mean, it might have been 4 o'clock in the morning, but it was just amazingly beautiful. And that really brought me joy and tears and everything. But the birth, it's the birth, the cycle, the evolution, the revolution of life as it meanders on. I think that brings me fantastic joy, and the creation that it sparks, and the idea of bringing things together, bringing two ideas, and having a third new thing as a result of it. I think that's just wonderfully joyful.
Oh, lovely. Do you have any regrets? That's an easy question now.
Nah. Didn't drink enough when I was a teenager.
Are you okay? It's too late now, yeah.
Should have partied more.
Well, okay, you can still party, maybe moderated. Is there anything you change about your life now?
Yeah. No, not at all. No, it's good, and the tough bits are good, and the good bits are good, and the bits in between are good. So yeah, I mean, whatever happens, it's good, and the painful stuff and the horrible stuff, it's still good. It's still nice, and it's still experience, and the challenges, even the tougher challenges, they're just challenges, and I might fail and whatever. I'll try again another time. I kind of got to the point in my life where it doesn't worry me too much. So yeah.
Okay. Now, I know you're an activist, and what would you say? Oh, there's a question here before I get on to that one. This is from Anne. What do you think is after death?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew. I'm looking forward to finding out.
Okay, what do you hope?
Sorry?
What do you hope is after death? Or have you, I mean, obviously you believe something is, because you didn't say nothing. So you're looking forward to finding out. So what do you imagine it might be like?
I don't think I can imagine it. And I have contemplated this, obviously, loads of times. I have no idea. But I think there's something. I think there is, even on a purely, chemical and physical level, the energy within the cells that make me up, that will continue. It might change and rot and disappear, but that there is still energy that within the atoms that will be around and has been around since the Big Bang, clearly. So there is some form of continuity, whatever that might look like. I kind of hope that there is something that mirrors that in more of a spiritual way, that there's a separate energy that will continue. But I really don't know. I mean, I did when I was in my early teens. Mother was a spiritualist, and she taught me along to the spiritualist church a few times, and I couldn't quite get my head around the idea that it's kind of the personality continues in exactly the same way, and but some of the stuff that I saw there was quite convincing, and it might well, I'm not going to rule it out, and it would be nice if it happens that way, but it'll be. I almost don't want to know, because it'll be more of an adventure, because it's the
Right.
one. It's the one certainty, isn't it? Obviously, that we're going to die, and therefore it's going to be an adventure for all of us.
Absolutely.
So I'm looking forward to it. Not just yet. Give me a bit more time, but yeah, when it happens, yeah, I'm up for it.
Brilliant. Blake says, I think even those of us who do work shamanically in the after-death realms, we have some concept or idea, but my feeling is that it's likely the tip of the iceberg. Perhaps the afterlife is on a need-to-know basis. Blake, absolutely. I did my death work years ago, and I had a journey, and it was wonderful. I was with a group of people, and we each came back and shared what we experienced, and everyone's was different. And but what it did for me was it took the fear out of dying, and it brought home how important it is to live your life now and to review it regularly, which we do as Druids. But one thing I learned from it was that judgment. I was brought up a Roman Catholic, so we're taught about the last day. Well, the good people go to heaven and the bad people go to hell, and then others go to purgatory or whatever it is. And on the last day, only the good people will rise. But there is judgment. And that my experience was that it's our judgment of ourselves. That was the most frightening thing, is how we judge ourselves. And that we need to, if we have lived the best possible life we can live, then we are more free of judgment when we do pass over. That we've had time to make amends or do a life review and see what we could change or whatever. And that's really, really important. So that, and then of course, yes, there is the need to know basis. And then there seems to be an essence of us that remains. Now, Pat mentioned organ donation, and she's wondering why some pagans and Druids are squeamish. Anyway, but I know I've seen films where people have had received a transplant, and then they have a sense. I don't know how true this is, or if this is just fantasy, or if this is actually how people who've had a transplanted organ within have felt, can feel something of the other person. I don't know.
I mean, it would make absolute sense for that to happen. So it kind of feels real, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I love the comment. I don't know, I've forgotten the person's name because I can't see the screen. The idea of we've got an idea about a vague notion of what the afterlife or the other life or other world's about, but there's a huge amount that we'll not know.
It's on a need-to-know basis. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of feels about right.
And he says, what strikes me about accounts of shamanic journeys and death work and realms are not just the differences, but that even so, there are a number of striking similarities too. Both are interesting. Absolutely. And I suppose the fact that there was a group of us doing it and went to a place, and had a different picture, but it's the fact that we were able to go there and come back with some kind of, I suppose, a personal teaching and something maybe to share with others. So, yeah. So, and then Stephanie says, that's back to honoring our ancestors and why they were the way they were in their own time. Who says who was good or bad in their lifetimes when our lives are over? What is good to some is bad to others. I like to think something happens after we die, but I think it's too different for us here in the conscious world to understand. I think so. It's
yeah, and just you can imagine the ancestors in 3 or 4 generations' time looking back and thinking that they flew away on holiday and that ruined our environment. What were they thinking? It's quite natural at the moment, isn't it? The actions we're taking now feel quite reasonable, but viewed with a future lens, looking backwards, they're gonna think we're quite, well, they could think we're quite evil, couldn't they? Potentially.
Well, I think so. And when you look back to, a few hundred years ago, when children weren't regarded as children, and children didn't have a childhood, and they were set to work from a very, very early age in factories, up and down chimneys, or wherever they were small enough to fit. And you think, oh my God, how could that have happened? But that was of necessity of the times. So it's a really interesting one, how the lens through which we view actions. And Blake says, as a future ancestor, I often use that I'm sure we're doing things we think we're righteous and noble now, but future generations will be aghast of. I can't argue with that. Yeah. That. So it's. Oh, I don't know. Our census, our national census, it's being filled in on Sunday, and there is a page where you can handwrite a message to leave for that will be read in 100 years' time.
Wow! Oh, how wonderful!
So, I mean, just that's really making me think. Give me an idea now what I might write in it, just like that.
I'm so sorry.
I hope that it's possible to read this, that you're still around to be able to read this. And if you are, then I'm sorry. Yeah. So
that's a lovely idea, isn't it? Wow. I mean, I think I heard they're getting rid of the UK census, but
why?
Probably money. As someone who's done the family history, it's such a rich resource. I'd hate to see it go, but the idea of leaving a message for your ancestors, wow, isn't that great?
Isn't it? It's quite creative for us. I can't understand why you would not, why you would get rid of the census. Because I mean, it's. I mean, when people go back and they're tracing ancestry or tracing, really important information, and they say, yes, your grandmother, great grandmother, wherever it is, was, or maybe your parents were living here. I think it's really, really important. And then Julie says, as a genealogist, I would have loved for that to have been a feature throughout. I assume you're talking about the note for the future. Yeah. So anyway, there's some reaction to not having a census as being a very, very strange thing. Cost. Can you afford not to?
I mean, who knows? The actions of our current government beg a belief at the best of times.
Well, I think we can all maybe comment on that it's almost, this is Ferdiad, it's almost like the country is being run on ideology rather than evidence. Anyway, let's hope it's, I hope it doesn't happen. I mean, that they don't get rid of it. Yeah. So one concern, I mean, I know obviously you have, as an activist, but one concern you have about the modern world.
I think it's that we've lost as a society, and not us on this call, but as a society, we've kind of lost the connection with the reality, with both the reality of the world and with the needs and the underlying spirituality of the world. And it, it comes down to the to the McDonald's adverts and the little bracelets that people have that seem to have replaced that connection that I'm sure most of us on this call this evening experience. And they're just, I suppose they're just forms of drugs that have replaced what many of us experience. And I think that's probably the worry, isn't it? I've forgotten the word you used, but hopefully that's the answer.
It's a concern about.
So yes,
Yes.
yeah, and how, you know, and trying to get that connection back in a way that's meaningful and fast enough, so that there is a chance that we can not completely screw up the planet.
And so, what gives you hope that we might not screw up the planet?
Yeah, quite. It's you know, the hope is that we can kind of wake up to the world, I suppose, and move away from some of these. And I use the word addictions, but you know, in its loosest sense, you know, whether it's flying away every other weekend to have a couple of nights in wherever it is, because you've got a holiday home out there, and it's nice, and it's probably very, very nice, and I'd love to do that occasionally, or whether it's I don't know, the McDonald's, or the or having whatever modern bit of life that kind of fills a void for people. I think the void needs to be filled in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Well, my last question, 2 parts, and this is my always end this one. What is your favorite season, and what is your favorite ceremony to mark the wheel of the year?
Winter, and the winter solstice, because it's my birthday.
So why winter? What is it about winter, apart from it being your birthday?
I mean, I love the snow. You know,
Yeah, and you get snow. Okay.
We had snow today, and it was just beautiful, and it didn't settle, but it was beautiful, and I like the cold.
Okay.
And I like the darkness, and the fact I don't get woken by the heat and the lights, and so it's just the quietness of it all, I think. I mean, it's annoying in many respects, you know. You can't go out and do much, but it's just that quiet stillness of winter that I really love.
Oh, brilliant. Well, Stuart, it's been an absolute joy talking to you, and I know from Blake says, good choice. I'm often chided for being a bit of a tundra druid myself.
Fantastic.
It's been an absolute joy talking to you, and
thank you.
So I just you can go backstage for a minute, and then, because I'll just say goodbye, and then we can read the comments together. So if you want to say goodbye to people.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening in. Blessings to you all.
Thanks a million, Stuart. I don't want to wait a second. Where's my thing? Oops. So I'll see you in a minute. So listen, thank you all very much for joining us, and for your comments. And as always, you know, you contribute so much to these conversations that it's just so wonderful to have them, that you animate them and make it such a joy for me to chat to my guests. So I look forward to seeing you next week for another Fireside Chat. In the meantime, be well and be safe, enjoying your snow, your cold, your sunny weather, wherever you are in the world. So slán go fóill until we meet again.